And the referee again checking his watch. And there it goes! The final whistle!
Carl Corazon will wait inside the box for this from Martin Nash. And a header on it there, and that might have been it. That was a goal for Canada. The header was at Jason DeVos.
One last chance for Canada. Sophie Schmidt takes a deflection. Matheson is down the goal. The wins bronze for Canada.
Qualified for World Cup '86, defeating Honduras by a score of 2-1 here in St. John's, Newfoundland this afternoon.
Welcome to the Canada Soccer Nation podcast. I'm Jason DeVos, the Director of Development with Canada Soccer, and I want to take this opportunity to wish everyone a belated Happy Canada Day. It was a couple days ago since we've recorded the podcast, but Canada Day is always one that it brings out the patriotism in our country, Brad, and we see this often around sporting events, but it's great to celebrate what an incredible country we are privileged to live in. What'd you get up to on Canada Day this year, Brad?
We celebrated at the local splash pad with the kids.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
Hot day. And we donned our favorite red shirts and shorts and socks.
Yeah.
And we all went over. My kids are very, very passionate about wearing Maple Leaf stuff on Canada Day. It's fairly entertaining.
Well, it's something that we see at sporting events, specifically at Canada's men's and women's national team events, and you see kids decked out head to toe in red, wearing the Maple Leaf, wearing Canada jerseys. It's something to behold for sure. And I think back to 5 years ago, roughly around this time, where the 2015 FIFA Women's World Cup took place on Canadian soil, and that's going to be the focus of today's episode. But going across the country, coast to coast, in my previous job as a soccer commentator for TSN, alongside my partner in crime, Luke Wildman, we got to see scores of Canadian kids, boys and girls, from coast to coast, decked out in red, just completely enraptured by Christine Sinclair and her teammates. What were you doing 5 years ago? Can you remember what you were doing 5 years ago during the Women's World Cup?
My kids were very young. I can say that. I'll preface it with that, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if it was to the day, but certainly taking in some Women's World Cup matches here in Ottawa. I was somewhat new to the city, somewhat new to sort of seeing sporting events here in Ottawa. And I can tell you the stadium was packed, and there were no Canadians on the field, but there were plenty of Canadian fans in the stands. Similar scene, right? I think the game I saw was the Netherlands and China, potentially. I don't remember exactly, but I definitely remember seeing so many young kids' faces with Canada Soccer tattoos on their faces, or Canada Soccer shirts, or just Canadian shirts. The stadium was awash in red. Somewhat unsurprisingly. I mean, that was a tremendous tournament, and I was pumped to have an opportunity to go pre Canada Soccer Days for me.
Yeah. And then you joined Canada Soccer, and you've never looked back since. So
that's true, man. I talk about it a lot, having benefited from the successes not only of 2007, which we sort of have recapped over the past couple of weeks on the podcast, but very much 2015, arriving in Canada, Canada Soccer early 2016. And the impacts of that competition were large. I mean, it loomed everywhere, from new staff members who had come over from having worked on the Women's World Cup, to just an energy about the organization, having hosted such a terrifically popular and successful Women's World Cup.
It was the most popular World Cup outside of the Men's World Cup that had been hosted by any country anywhere in the world, and set a new standard for event hosting with 1.35 million spectators, which was the largest attendance for any FIFA event outside of the Men's FIFA World Cup. So it absolutely kickstarted that. And I've said this before, what I'm really excited to see is the impact of that tournament in 10 or 15 years, when the young boys and girls that I saw in their scores across every stadium are going to be teenagers, and see what impact that had on them as a youngster, getting to experience that, 50,000 plus fans in the stadium cheering on women's football, and seeing players like Christine Sinclair, breaking through, making a name for themselves, and the young generation coming up supporting Christine. I mean, obviously her name is at the forefront all the time and always will be, and rightly so, whenever women's football is discussed in Canada and around the world. But it was really the next generation of youngsters coming through that was really so exciting that we're starting to see now as well. So it'll be great to see what that legacy is. And we're going to talk a little bit more about legacy when we have our guests come on. But before we get to them, talk a little bit about what's going on right now with Canada Soccer, what people can look forward to, and what's coming up next.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we've got our women's national team players back on the pitch again. NWSL is back.
Yes.
And on the men's side, MLS is back, to steal a turn of phrase. So a couple of matches for NWSL this weekend, both on Saturday and Sunday, 4 matches across the 2 days. And then in the middle of next week, ahead of our next podcast, the MLS is back. Competition will have kicked off. So I think the Impact are the first to play next Thursday on July 9th. And then the Whitecaps also play, and then TFC will be back on the field on Friday. So nice to have our national team players back. By and large, obviously we've been watching Alfonso, and he'll also be on TV this weekend, incidentally, on One Soccer. The German Cup, DFB Pokal Cup final will be on One Soccer this weekend. I think it's the 4th of July, if I'm not mistaken. So that'll be exciting. Be nice to see Fonzie try and pick up a bit more hardware, like he doesn't have enough already.
Well, the future is definitely bright for that boy. That's for sure. He's making a name for himself globally, and his transfer value, or estimated transfer value, has skyrocketed in recent months for sure with his performances. So great to watch him play. But when we come back after the break, we're going to have Sandra Gage, the Chief Marketing Officer with Canada Soccer, join us to talk about the 2015 FIFA Women's World Cup and the legacy of that tournament and what that brings for Canada moving forward. So stay tuned. After the break, we'll have Sandra Gage. Sandra Gage has been the Chief Marketing Officer with Canada Soccer for over a decade now. And during her tenure with Canada Soccer, Sandra completed a 3-year secondment as the Chief Marketing Communications Officer for the FIFA Women's World Cup Canada 2015 and FIFA U20 Women's World Cup Canada 2014. She's been involved in senior marketing communications roles within amateur sport for over 25 years and has vast experience in major international event hosting. Sandra, welcome to the Canada Soccer Nation podcast. It's great that you're able to join us today. How are you?
I'm doing great, Jason. Thanks for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to finally get a chance to talk to you in this format.
Yeah, it's funny, it's been a long time coming. I mean, we're on episode 10 now, and I think this is probably the 3rd or 4th time I've requested you to come on as a guest, but it's great to have you on because you played an integral role in the Women's World Cup, both the under-20 event and the FIFA Women's World Cup 2015. Let's start back at the beginning, though, because the journey to that tournament, the 2015 FIFA Women's World Cup, began long before the first match was played on June 6th. Tell us a little bit about the decision that Canada Soccer made to bid for the tournament and what that process entailed.
2015 is 5 years ago, as we all know.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Which seems crazy. It really started back as long ago as 2002, when, Canada has always been viewed as a global leader in the women's game. And they saw, part of that commitment to the women's game and growing the women's game was hosting major events. So back in 2002, the organization hosted it was then the Women's World U19 Championships. It's now the U20 World Cup. But some people might remember there were close to 50,000 people watching the final of that competition in Edmonton at Commonwealth Stadium. So I think we set the bar back then that we wanted to be a part of this and we wanted to make a statement through the women's game. So certainly over the years, we've hosted a number of tournaments. In 2015 was an opportunity for us. We were originally interested in hosting in 2011. But Germany had stepped up and Germany was awarded that opportunity. But, from that day, we started working on 2015. And a key part of that was really bringing in all the levels of government and ensuring that we had their support. So that didn't just involve the federal government, that involved the official host city governments as well as the provinces. So we had the federal government, 6 cities, and 6 provinces on board to help us. So that process really was getting their engagement, putting a world-class bid together, and securing the right to host.
Yeah. From a business standpoint, this was an enormous undertaking for Canada Soccer. I mean, you talk about a coast-to-coast event. Nothing like this had ever really been done before. What did that entail in the years preceding the tournament, in the lead up to the tournament? What was involved in planning a tournament of this magnitude?
Well, it took a few years off some of our lives. I cannot.
And your family's lives as well.
Absolutely. And, it entailed, once you had the governments on board, you really started building the plans and I would say the staffing structure to implement the competition. So, we rewarded the competition in 2011. We all went to Germany, some of us who were part of the senior management team for the tournament, to take in what they were doing. And it was a phenomenal event. So we were part of FIFA's observer program with that competition. And then we came back to Canada and we got to work and we put together a plan and a structure. So we, by the end of it, had 175 staff on board for the tournament who worked to execute it over the course of those 3 years. We had a headquarters in Ottawa. We had 6 offices across the country from coast to coast. And, 100% of the risk of putting on this tournament was Canada Soccer's, because the business model with the Women's World Cup is that you take on that risk. So it was critical to us that we had to sell some tickets to make a profit for this tournament, not only to execute the tournament, but to have a legacy for the future. And we're very, very proud of what we accomplished. We're proud of the $500 million in economic impact, the $250 million in GDP, which in today's world with everything going on with COVID, how much that means, I should say, to economies right now. It kind of crystallizes for you how important that injection was to the Canadian economies at that time. So lots of work behind the scenes, a great team, and a lot of collaboration with the Federation, with Canada Soccer. Some of us worked in seconded roles and went over and worked on the World Cup, and some of us, some of the folks stayed and had as important a role to tell that story of this great tournament in our country.
Yeah, 1.35 million tickets sold, over $50 million in ticket sales. It's an incredible achievement for sure, and one that I think has set the standard for Women's World Cup events moving forward. One of the things that Peter Montopoli mentioned on our 2026 World Cup preview podcast is that the World Cup is unique in that it takes place in multiple locations across a country, and in 2026 cases across 3 countries, whereas an Olympic Games is generally more centralized in one city per se, although they can be spread out a little bit. What were some of the challenges in 2015, that were involved in hosting a tournament like this across multiple time zones?
Well, there were many.
there were a few.
You know what? It was 5 time zones sounds a bit crazy, but when you're the second largest landmass in the world, that's what you have as a country. And it's an important fact that we were the first single sport competition to be held from coast to coast in this country, which is really a big part of why the federal government was behind us. So, it was about planning. It was about, actually understanding what our market was willing to do to participate in the tournament. So, for example, we talk about the ticket sales and the revenues we brought in and the numbers, but, for years and years, there was conversations that the Canadian public wouldn't pay to buy a ticket to go see a soccer match. So, we really changed that, and we did not put tickets on sale just to fill the stadium. We did it in a way that it was an affordable ticket. We had $20.15 as a price point for obvious reasons across every match, but we also were able to charge a fair price for the finals, which ensured that we had that financial legacy. So I think what we did was we really understood our market. And we did a lot of great work in building a great story to tell. And I think we did that through the various, FIFA assets that they bring to the table. But, we really had a big influence in what those were. And we're really happy with the story we were able to tell.
One of the things you tie in about telling a story, one of the things that really hit me, and I could see right from the get-go how powerful this was going to be, was the official tournament slogan of "To a Greater Goal." Tell us a little bit about that, how that slogan came to be, what it means for all Canadians even to this day.
Well, the "To a Greater Goal" was about what this sport can do both on and off the pitch. So those of us who love the game know how the game has a heartbeat and how it just unifies. And we know that about the game, but what can it do off the pitch? And so we actually came up with a slogan through input from our players, from all the stakeholders involved. And it was a gentleman out of Montreal, Justin Kingsley, who did the work on the slogan for us and got us to a greater goal. And it really does continue to tell the story today, I think, of our sport, and also about a lot of the people involved in the sport. And I think the next guest will provide some insight into that. But certainly, it was about taking this in the stands. It was about the 20 million people that watched it on TV. It was about the 100,000 people that went to fan zones. But it's about the people today who still remember what the tournament was like and still have that motivation. It's a Jordan Heidema who she came through our Rex programs. The Rex program is a legacy of 2015. And she talks about watching the tournament and being at the tournament. That's what we've done for the future of the sport.
Yeah, the number of young women's national team players now who reference that tournament as a touchstone of a spark for them is incredible. And that's the legacy piece that we'll talk about in a second. But I want to look back to the first game, June 6, 2015, the opening match for Canada at Commonwealth Stadium in Edmonton against China. What was that experience like for you? I mean, you'd worked for years up to that point for that moment. Did you actually get to watch the game and enjoy the game as a fan, or were you working feverishly throughout? What was that experience like for you?
Well, I think you and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago when TSN rebroadcast the match. I watched it, and there were two things that came to mind. First was, wow, Jason is commentating this match. It's great to hear him in his previous role.
I thought you were going to say terrible commentary, but
no, it was lovely to hear you as always. So the visual of that match took me by surprise. I was
it was amazing.
Yeah,
it was amazing.
And being in the stadium, I don't think I appreciated it because I was too nervous. And I was nervous for two reasons. One, about the opening ceremonies going off without a hitch, which they did. And the second was the result of the match, because it was so critical to the success of the tournament that our team played well and that we got the results we needed so we could continue to build and the momentum would be there for us. And just for the team to perform well, because, those of us who have the privilege of working with that team, they're incredible role models, incredible people. And they put so much into it that you really wanted them to be successful. You wanted John's plans to come together. And in that moment when Christine scored that goal, it was relief. It was utter relief. And I was watching the game, to answer your question, bits and pieces through my hands because I didn't take it. But I was actually in the stands with my husband and my son had joined me in Edmonton to take in the opening match. And it was one of the ways I wanted to thank them, because they'd been through a lot. I really hadn't been around for the last couple of years, and it took a toll on everybody. So to have them there was incredible. And they were the whole match telling me, don't worry, they're going to win. They're going to win. They're going to score, because they're true football fans. And then for the final, I was able to bring my daughter out to Vancouver and have her be a part of it. And I think her highlight was carrying around Kadisha Buchanan's Young Player Award afterwards when we had to do all the TV interviews, and she still talks about it to this day. So it was pretty special.
It's incredible the impact that a tournament like that can have, and the legacy that goes along with that, both personally and professionally. The legacy of hosting a World Cup, Women's World Cup, Men's World Cup, it can be a launching pad for a host nation to grow and develop and invest in the game. Talk a little bit about some of the legacies of the 2015 Women's World Cup. What stands out for you amongst those?
You know what? There's a lot. And, last weekend, the NWSL kicked off. That's a legacy of 2015. I don't know if a lot of people connect those two dots, but Canada Soccer invested in that league along with U.S. Soccer and the Mexican Federation in order to give the players a common place to play and to provide them that professional opportunity, because until then, a lot of them were unattached FC and didn't have that consistency in their professional career. So we're proud today that we still support that league. We have a number of allocated players in that league. You know what? We hired 65% female staff. And that was a priority for us as an organization because we wanted those individuals to continue in the game or to go to other sports and make a contribution. And some of those staff actually work for Canada Soccer today. Some of them have gone on to other roles, and we're very, very proud of that. And, part of that focus as well was a program called Women Leading Women. And I think you will speak to that a little bit later. And that was within the women's national team program. And that was something that we worked with John Herdman on. And, some of these women through that program, I think when you guys talk about it later, it's incredible what they've done. And, there's tangibles like we established regional Excel centers where the players continue to come. The more Sinclairs more often are coming through the system. We reached 1.5 million school children. That was just one other thing we did as part of it. And we have 18 FIFA 2-star pitches across the country that are still being used. And that's more than the US has as 2-star pitches. So,
wow.
There are tangibles, intangibles. And I think at the end of the day, the greatest legacy is we were a soccer nation after that tournament if we weren't before. And it set the stage for what we could do with 2026.
Well, I mean, that's a great segue to my last question for you, Sandra. How does the success from 2015 help the process of co-hosting in 2026 on the Men's World Cup? What are we going to take from 2015 into 2026?
Well, I think we already have, because when we were on our international visits to secure bids for 2026, I don't think there was one country that I went to as part of one of the bid teams that didn't say they hadn't been in Canada for 2015 and that they knew what we could do. So it's already done that. It's already set the stage for us to welcome the world. But I think, what it did was it changed the perception of the sport in our country. It showed that we have established a soccer economy in Canada. Within 30 days, we generated over $50 million in ticket sales and sold 1.35 million tickets. So we show that we can do it in our country, that people want to be a part of this. But it's not just about the economics of it. It's about the lasting impression that it left. And when you look at the photos and you understand what it means to be in a sea of red in a stadium where people used to come in hockey jerseys to watch us play, and they don't do that anymore. Now they come in a soccer jersey. We are doing the right things, and we know that people are united behind one common goal. So, I mean, there's the practicalities of we know how FIFA works better. We know how to execute an event. All those things. We are world class at that, and we've proven it because this is the last tournament for us to host. Once we've done this, we've hosted every FIFA tournament. And I don't think any other member association can actually say that. So we're very proud that we not only are supporting the youth level, but we're supporting the growth of the game around the world.
Sandra, I know you're very busy, so I won't take up any more of your time, but I'm told that you hold, as a senior management lead, not one, not two, but 3 attendance records in different sports. My sources tell me that in basketball, you were part of the World Basketball Championships in Toronto in the late 90s, and then in 2001, part of the World Figure Skating Championships in Vancouver that set an attendance record, and then obviously in 2015, the FIFA Women's World Cup Canada 2015 attendance record. So So congratulations to you, Sandra. You talk about legacy. That's one of the legacies that we have in Canadian sport, is that we've proven to the world that we're capable of putting on world-class events. And that's down very much to the leadership of people like yourself. So thank you very much for joining us. Thanks for all you do, and keep up the great work.
Thanks. And thanks for dating me on those references.
I'll have to talk to my little source about that.
Yeah. Okay. You guys, thank you very
brilliant.
much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Sandra. Thanks. When we come back, we're going to talk to two members of the women's national team in 2015 about the legacy of that tournament, their experience of the event, and what they're doing right now, how it's helped them transition into the roles that they're currently in. Stay tuned. We'll have them after the break. Welcome back to the Canada Soccer Nation podcast. My next two guests need no introduction, but they're going to get one just the same. Robyn Gayle was capped 81 times for Canada's women's national team, scoring twice. She won a bronze medal as a member of our women's national team at the London 2012 Olympic Games, transitioned at the end of her playing career into a new role with Canada Soccer as the men's and women's Excel mental and cultural manager. Robyn has also been co-hosting the women's national team Excel webinar series with Rian Wilkinson that Brad and I have dubbed the Robyn and Rian Show, and she's been doing a stellar job of that. She's been providing great insight into the women's national team Excel program and is one of my favorite people to talk to. Robyn, welcome to the Canada Soccer Nation podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me, Jason. I really like that
Good.
intro. I'm gonna have to hire you.
I'll be your agent. Perfect. Very good. Very good. Well, hang on 1 second. I'm going to introduce your colleague who's also going to be joining us. Karina LeBlanc is the head of women's football at CONCACAF. She is an Olympic bronze medalist in 2012 alongside Robyn with our women's national team. She's a member of the Canada Soccer Hall of Fame. She's an ambassador for UNICEF. She's a media personality. And as if that wasn't enough, she is also the mother of a beautiful baby girl named Paris. Karina LeBlanc, welcome to the Canada Soccer Nation podcast. How are you today?
I am fantastic. Thanks for having me. And as well.
Well, it's great to have both of you on the podcast because you are both two of my favorite people to talk to. I always learn something when I have conversations with either of you. Karina, I'm going to start with you because obviously you've had a major life-changing event, the arrival of your beautiful daughter, Paris. Tell us a little bit about that process. Today is your first day back on the job at CONCACAF. Hopefully we're not taking up too much time. How are you now balancing the most difficult job in the world, which is being a mother, with a career as the head of women's football at CONCACAF?
Well, you caught me in day one, so I'm doing great. It's being a mother. I mean, everything I've ever done as an individual has been special, but this is hands down the most special thing because you're bringing life into this world and experiences from playing for this beautiful country. And, we wanted to inspire the next generation. The next generation were young girls and boys, but now for me, it's a personal thing because that next generation is now Paris, my baby girl. So it's one of those things where, my why has a deeper meaning. It has a personal meaning. And, now to take that into CONCACAF, it's the transition is going to be interesting and different, but I'm on day one and I'm smiling ear to ear because, I get a break from being a mother for 2 seconds. And then all of a sudden it's great because I'm working from home right now. I can just go over to her and then hold her and I'm like, okay, everything's complete. So it's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, it has to be a challenge and one that I don't have personal experience with, unfortunately. But I'm so pleased for you and your husband, Jason, and for Paris. I know it's been a challenging time for you, but thank you for making the time to chat with us. I want to go back to March of 2011 with both of you, which is when FIFA awarded Canada the rights to host the 2015 Women's World Cup. That was a time when both of you were key figures in the women's national team. I'll start with you, Robyn. What went through your mind when you learned that you had the opportunity to play in a home World Cup?
I think it was pretty surreal. I think it's fair to say that for all of our teammates because growing up personally, like the first World Cup I watched was the men's 1994 World Cup in the US. And that's where the dream kind of started. And then getting more involved when the 1999 World Cup happened. You never really the dream is to be a World Cup. Any footballer wants to participate and, hopefully, try to hold that golden trophy, but to actually have it be at home, to play in front of your fans and your family is kind of something that was beyond our wildest dreams. And I was fortunate to have an element of that experience in 2002 with the U19 team, but never would have thought that would be happening on the senior level. And I'm sure we're going to get into it, but it has certainly exceeded our expectations.
Karina, what went through your mind when you found out that the World Cup was coming to Canada in 2015?
It's one of those things where you just, as a kid, obviously you dream of playing in a World Cup. I know when I started on the national team, there'd be 8 people in the stands and, 5 were my family members. But you see the game grow. And when it happened, it was a dream come true, but it wasn't a dream that you'd actually sat through and thought what it would be like. And I think when it was announced, we're like, this is the reality. We're going to get a home World Cup. But the way Canada got behind it, the way that, like Robyn said, she talked about the 99 World Cup. You're like, is this possible in our country? It was one of those things where it was a dream come true, but it was a dream you hadn't actually dreamt through completely. So it was just exciting, waiting to see what would happen.
Yeah. Fast forward from March 2011 to the summer of 2012, winning a bronze medal at the Olympic Games in London, it vaulted the women's national team into Canadian hearts and minds. I mean, you were obviously sequestered in the Olympic bubble, and you didn't really get to experience that until you came home, but it was chaos. I mean, everyone in Canada fell in love with your team and the journey that you went on. I mean, guys that I grew up playing hockey with as a kid who never had any interest in soccer were calling me after the semifinal game against the US, screaming into the phone about how we were robbed. I mean, it just converted every Canadian into a fan of the women's national team. And obviously the success of the bronze medal is huge for the program. How did that success kind of provide a bit of a springboard in the run up to 2015 for the group? Robyn, we'll go to you first.
Well, I think, as you mentioned there, Jason, the Olympics expanded our reach with Canada. We've always had an incredible backing with our Canada Red, Canada soccer fans. But what happened at the Olympics transcended soccer. It transcended Canada soccer. And it was, we had so many more people who were interested and behind us and started following our team. So going into 2015, actually even going into 2012, a big part of our vision as a team, of course, is, seeing our flag rise and being on the podium. But we were aligned to a greater vision, which was this purpose of inspiring the next generation. So having that platform be expanded in 2012 was really, it helped us show what the possibilities were for our impact to influence in 2015, and really gave us a greater purpose going into that tournament.
There were extensive preparations put in place by John Herdman, the women's national team head coach, through that period of time, and his staff. What was that journey like for you, Karina, as players? You spent a lot of time living together as a group for long stretches in the build up to that tournament. What was that like for you to experience?
Well, just to go back on what Robyn was saying, I remember coming home from the Olympics, right? And as a kid, you dream of winning an Olympic medal, but you never actually dream of what happens after that. And I remember coming in the Vancouver airport, it was Sink, Soph, Emzer, and myself. And to be clear, Christine Sinclair, Emzer, Sophie Schmidt, myself. And the flight attendant was like, we walked off the plane and she pulled over and she's like, women's soccer. We're like, yeah. She's like, you guys might want to freshen up. And we're like, you're rude. Freshen up. You know what I mean? You just off a long flight. And she's like, no, you don't understand. They've been waiting for you. And I'll never forget it because you come through the glass doors because the international flights in Vancouver, the doors open. And before we walked through, we were hearing the national anthem being sang. And it wasn't by people. It was by hundreds and hundreds of people. And I remember walking through and turning, and all of a sudden it was packed. The escalator stopped. People were packed, standing up, down. You had an older woman. I remember, I'll never forget that, an older woman standing there crying a young boy, young girls, parents, and they're all had their cameras out and they wanted to get a picture of us. And I remember we looked at each other being like, what? And that was the shift that we felt walking into our home soil in Canada. So then that prepared us almost for like what a home World Cup would be like. And then the preparation, like you talk about, we were a family. We lived together, we stayed together, we fought together. Like it wasn't just on the field that we prepared. We prepared as a family. And like Robyn said, the whole goal was to inspire that next generation of kids to have this dream, but also believe that they could take the sport. And as Robyn was just saying that, I was just remembering the moment of that pride of being Canadian, but then a home World Cup. You actually get to live it and play it. And it was more like those people from the airport now expanded into this whole country. And it was just amazing kind of the lead up into it. And then all of a sudden, here we have a home World Cup and Canadians just showed up for us just as they did in that day. And, you know, I mean, I didn't really answer your question, but it just reminded me of that memory because it was so powerful. Now, 10 times fold hosting a World Cup and preparing for us. We had that in us. We knew what it was like for Canadians to fall in love with us because almost to this day, people still come up to me. I don't go to bars anymore now, but like people at bars be like, you know what, like you owe me a TV. I smashed my TV with a brick after that semifinals because you guys were robbed, but it was the grit you showed, everything that made us Canadian, people fell in love with. So taking that into the World Cup was almost like we felt so much pride to host the World Cup, so much more than just playing the game of football.
Yeah. How big is it to feel that as a team, as a group of players, to feel the weight of the nation supporting you and being behind you?
For me, it was that 12th man. You know, we talked about it going into the World Cup. We would say, please be that 12th man or 12th woman for us. But we felt the love of the country. And how we got in the tournament was because we were inspired by the country. We were inspired by each other. You know, we created that environment where we weren't going to make any shortcuts. John took us through of what it meant to be a great Canadian, and every single day we would be great Canadians. I remember the speech he gave us is like, what is a great Canadian? And he brought us in, and you know, that was one of the things that John did is he brought us in and he asked us our why. Like, why do we want to play for this country? But what makes a great Canadian? And to display that every single day. And once we understood what it meant to be a great Canadian, then to have all these great Canadians support us and inspire us. We had stories of young girls and young boys, but also it was adults. It was everyone top down that really made us feel like we were playing more than just kicking a ball for this country, but we were like the epitome of what a great Canadian was. And if you really since we went so deep into it, it inspired us to want to play like bigger than just the sport of soccer. We wanted just Canadians to feel that we were a better version of them. And that's what it was like.
And I also think like when Karina's talking, is talking about being a great Canadian, and we talk about inspiring a generation, like any country that's hosting a World Cup or any major world tournament, that is a lot of pressure. Like you do have the support of the 12th man, but you have the demand of expectation to perform. But I think what John did and what he does brilliantly is, like Karina said, our attention was shifted from, you know, being able to embrace that 12th man, working towards being great Canadians, working towards our vision and our greater purpose of inspiring Canadians. So we were able to embrace the pressure, and it wasn't pressure anymore. It was a support system for us. And that's what helped made it all incredible. And Canadians are incredible fans. So everything paired together, and I think it really helped.
So when you walk out at Commonwealth Stadium on June 6th for the first game against China, there's 53,000 people in attendance. It was a sea of red. It was an incredible scene. What do you both remember about that game, or is it just washed over you and it's just a fog now? What do you remember? What stands out to you?
For me, it was like, it sounds silly, but it was like a loud whoa, like, because finally, you know what I mean? It's people see athletes and they see the glamorous life and they see, you know, the commercials or whatnot. But for us, like this is a team that a lot of us had been around where people didn't quite show up. a lot of us were like ambassadors for the game, trying to get people to fall in love with the game just as much as we did. So stepping out, you felt like people got it, they saw it, they believed it. And it was one of those things where the excitement of the game was there, but it was the excitement for people showing up for us and believing in us and wanting to see what we could do. And the game came down to the very last minute. We just wanted to make it interesting, obviously. But the way it all unfolded, it almost like it sucked you more into the game, and people fell more in love with us because it was like an amazing story. And it was just, I just remember that feeling, stepping out and like hearing the anthem. And it's like, you've heard it a million times, but it was so special then because everyone was singing with us.
Yeah, for me, like I can never top Karina's enthusiasm, so I won't try. But hearing the anthem always for me has been maybe my favorite part, other than maybe tackling and a couple other things. But hearing the anthem is probably my favorite part of being an international and representing Canada. So like Karina said, like being in front of 53,000 of our fans, our fellow Canadians, and hearing them sing with us, I get chills right now just reflecting back on that moment. And like she said, our team always has a way of keeping things interesting. So, Sink scoring that penalty, I think it was within the last 10 minutes of the match, and seeing the entire team celebrating together with our staff. I think when I look back on pictures and little memories, like I don't remember a lot of the minute details, but I do remember that togetherness and that collective willpower and that shared mental model towards going towards something that we were working for our country, for each other, and for the next generation.
And just to add to what Robyn said, like when Sink scored the goal, like the picture, I can remember it. Like it's one thing to like, yes, we scored, but then the place just erupted. You know what I mean? Everybody, like for it to come down like to a penalty shot, it's like you couldn't write the book better in those terms. I mean, for us, I know John, and for us, we wanted it to be earlier, but for it to come to that moment, and it was like you could hear a pin drop, and then she scores, and it was an eruption. And I like Robyn saying, getting goosebumps. It was like it's almost like the pressure, because the pressure, like we embraced it, but in that moment it was just let out. And that's what hosting a home World Cup. I don't think that moment would have been so special. Well, I know it wouldn't have if it wasn't at home and if it wasn't Canadians. And it's like we just hugged the biggest hug, but then you look up in the crowd and everyone's just going crazy. You know what? That's what hard work was for. Moments like that.
It was a tense game. I mean, it was a game that you dominated, that, all of the statistics pointed towards a comfortable Canadian victory. But I remember them hitting both posts with a free kick. I remember Jose hitting the crossbar with a strike from distance. And then it was the 92nd minute when Sinky stepped up to the penalty spot and slotted in a perfect penalty off the base of the post. And you're absolutely right in your recollection. It was like the top coming off a pressure-filled canister. It was like relief. It was like joy, everything combined into one. It was just an incredible experience. And I one of my favorite pictures is when Christine's running to John, and all of the players who were on the bench are just waiting, like on their tiptoes behind John, ready to pounce. And it showed to me the collectiveness of that group of players. And talk a little bit about that, Robyn. I think you touched on it a little bit about, the shared mental model and how important that is for success. How do you then take that into the next game 5 days later? Because it's great to have this burst of emotion, but then you've got to settle yourself down again, don't you? And prepare for the next game that's coming up 5 days later, which is going to be against New Zealand. How did you prepare for that match?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, like with the process that our staff and that John created for us, our focus was so much placed on the process that it's like you create windows where you enjoy and you embrace that moment of, that win, that first win at home, that incredible moment with Sink and the team. But then we know, like, one thing we've learned really well on our team is to have that reset moment. So it's always the next task focus for us. So everything we've done has been about preparing. So you get the job done, but then it's on to the next one, because we know that match is done, but that was only the beginning of what we were there to do. So I think John did a really great job of always keeping us very process focused. And that's what helped us to keep moving forward and keep looking ahead and not getting stuck in what had already happened.
Yeah. You drew the match against New Zealand 0-0 at Commonwealth, and then the travel kicked in. You went off to Montreal's Olympic Stadium to play against the Netherlands. As a team, how were you welcomed from one Canadian host city to the next? So when you went from Edmonton to Montreal and then later in the tournament into Vancouver, did you expect the country to support the team and the tournament with record crowds like it did? And did that motivate you as a group of players?
Yeah, I think going into, like Karina kind of said, it's like we had a taste of it coming home after 2012 that the country was getting behind us or was behind us. But I think to move from province to province and to see the support, and we go for team walks when we're doing a part of our like daily prep or match day prep, and when you're walking around the cities and you're being embraced by fans of all different ages and backgrounds, people are like, just welcoming us, and you really feel like you're at home everywhere that we went. So that part of it, like, I don't know if we expected that, but we were just so well embraced, and everywhere we went, we were also like, our families were all there. So it was incredible. So our like immediate blood family was there, and our Canada soccer family was there. So everywhere we truly felt like we were at home.
Mm-hmm. The 1-1 draw against the Netherlands in Montreal meant Canada won their group for the first time in World Cup history and set up a round of 16 match in Vancouver against Switzerland. So it was back on a plane again, but to a place that many of the women's national team players call home, and that many of the players have adopted as their second home. What was the build-up like to that game in the knockout stage against Switzerland, Robyn?
Yeah, so I mean, we were definitely embraced, and everywhere we went did feel like home. But Vancouver's been the city where we've done the majority of our residency and training programs for the last 10, 15 years of our program, maybe longer than that. So it really did feel like we were coming back to our home as a team. That's a place where like we all have friends there. We've developed our communities within there. We have habits, like we've lived there. In the lead up to the World Cup, we did our residency program there. So going quote unquote home to Vancouver was amazing, and just making that way out of the group and the pathway, like coming out of the group, it was interesting, and it was a testament to where the women's game has gone. There was no easy pathway to the finals, but to be on the pathway that had us back in Vancouver, it just felt very divine, and like, this is where we're meant to be, and this is where we've always been. So it was nice to come back.
So a 1-0 victory over the Swiss set up a quarterfinal match against England at BC Place in Vancouver, your hometown, Karina. Talk a little bit about the atmosphere, the feeling within the stadium. What was it like for you going into that match, playing in front of your hometown fans, and many of the players call Vancouver home? What was that like for you?
It was amazing. I mean, we played big games in Vancouver before, right? We'd had CONCACAF qualifiers, we'd had different things, but to come home for us, it's almost like it was our team home too. Like for me personally, it was home, but it was our team home too. And to come home, and the momentum had been building, and every game the momentum continued to build. And then I remember driving to the game, and it was a sea of red outside. And it almost like every game was like that, but it's like coming home and having that sea of red was phenomenal. And just the stadium, and like for me, like I knew very well going in, it was my last, this was going to be it. And every game was almost a beautiful bonus for me in my career. But to step in the arena, I say the arena, the stadium, and it just be a sea of red, and to know like this was now like the do or die, and with all the pressures and with everything, like for me, it was just every moment was special, from seeing the red to hearing the fans to now it was like, we had to perform, to it just felt almost like a perfect fitting. And I'll just forever remember driving into the stadium and people just yelling and cheering, and you're seeing men and women wearing our jerseys, and you're seeing like it was a perfect wave just continuing to happen. So when I say it was amazing, it sounds so simple, but literally it was just phenomenal.
The result wasn't what everyone wanted. Obviously, to get knocked out of the tournament at that stage to England, who went on to claim third place in the tournament, was a huge disappointment. One of the things that has most impressed me over the years in working with the women's national team players and staff is their individual and collective ability to evolve and to deal with setbacks and to meet the next challenge that's presented for them. You are both very much in leadership roles, and you're role models that others look up to in your position within the sport. How did the 2015 Women's World Cup experience for both of you help prepare you for the roles that you're in now? Robyn, we'll go to you first.
I think overall, like what we talked about, the preparation for that World Cup and that whole journey of our team starting from 2011 with John, just building in the ideas of inspiring the next generation and having women leading women, and keeping us engaged in the sport, I think really kind of set the standard that this is what it could be. And what we've seen now is like the majority of our players that have retired since 2012, 2015 are still heavily involved in soccer or in sports in some way in Canada. So coming out of that World Cup for me, like Karina spoke about knowing that that was her last one and every game was a bonus. And I didn't know at that point that would be my last international event as a player. And in a weird way, as soon as it was done, then I knew it was. And all the experiences, though, are the same ones that bring, for me personally in my role now, working with both the men's and the women's teams, is I can take the experiences from Karina as a player going into a World Cup, knowing she's retiring, my experiences, other players who are younger having their first experience, and use that to help develop our plans for, our men are going to be having a World Cup at home in 2026. Our women are going to be going for a gold medal next year. Like, all those experiences help inform our preparation. So that's been invaluable for me to go through that with our team as a player.
Karina, your role now with CONCACAF is wide-ranging across 41 member associations trying to support the growth of women's football. What have you taken out of your journey and the 2015 experience at the World Cup, the disappointment of getting knocked out? I've seen you speak to women and girls across CONCACAF and speak passionately about the journey and finding your why. How have you transitioned those experiences into your current role?
I think at the end of 2015, I think we all asked ourselves, what next? And for some players, it was, okay, the next World Cup is my next goal. What John had done with all of us is he made us all believe that we needed to stay in the game and give back in a certain way. And for me, I knew I wanted to give back, but I knew that wouldn't be the end. I didn't know how. I didn't know how it was going to happen. But, I think for me, the 2015 World Cup was a beautiful way for me to know that I was not done in the sport. And Victor, who was our old president at CSA and now president at CONCACAF, we had many discussions, and, he created this role, which was perfect because then I could step in and, I grew up in the Caribbean. I moved to Canada when I was 8 years old. And I knew that in growing up here, I didn't know I had an athletic bone in my body. So it was almost like the reality of what the region had, I had a better idea of. And I knew I wanted more girls to experience what we experienced. I wanted more girls to dream a dream as big as we got to live out. We went into that World Cup to inspire a generation. And for me, that was like the why. And I wanted to continue to be in a position where I could do something to help inspire the next generation of girls to fulfill their dreams, but also knowing that playing this sport is so much bigger than just playing the sports. It's what you learn from it. It's the tools you take into life. And John had said to me, I remember he did an interview and we all were there, and someone asked him, what's his legacy? And it wasn't winning or losing. And he turned to us as women. And he's like, so that we have the next leaders in this world sitting right here in front of us. In whatever capacity we go on to do that, we take what we've learned from the sport and we take it into whatever lane we want to go in, and we drive that lane and we really lead and make change. And we be the game changers. And I think for me, that's what's beautiful about the role that I have at CONCACAF is I get to play a role in being a game changer and in inspiring that next generation and that generation of women to really go out and go after their dreams and do big things and don't be apologetic about it. Because that's what our team did. We went out and we were bold and we took the pressure and we loved it. And yes, in some people's eyes, we failed, but you look at the numbers now, there's no chance that what we did as a country and as women, we failed. Where you look at the World Cup in 2019 and of 750 million that watched it in Canada to 1.12 billion that watched it in France. It's something special to be a part of like that generation or that player group that really helped transform the game into something else. And that's what I'm hoping to do here at CONCACAF. And that's what all the women on the team are doing, is that we took what we learned in 2015 and we were like, this is just the beginning. We're going to be game changers in our own lane, in our own way. And we're going to help transform the game into something bigger than it was when we came into it. And that's what Legacy is. And I feel like that's what I have the fortunate ability, and Robyn and all the girls that played on that team. No one has gone backwards in their life. They've taken that World Cup experience and said, what can I do with this to make the game better, but also in a sense to make the world better?
I think that's such a powerful way to envision the experience. I mean, ultimately, there can only ever be one winner at a World Cup. And to say that everyone else who doesn't win the trophy is a loser and can't take anything out of the experience is wrong, because you're living proof that you can learn from the experience, adapt, evolve, and then drive forward and become a leader in your field. The program that John launched, the Women Leading Women program, was introduced during your time with the team. Why is it important for young girls to see women in leadership positions in our sport and have role models that they can look up to?
I think you have to see it to believe it. And like, period. You have to see it to believe it. You have to see it as a young girl to believe that you can do it as an older woman. As an older woman. I'm not older woman, but as an older person. You need to hear the voices. You need to actually to envision something, you've got to be like, you know what? I want to be like her. I want to be like her. I want to be like her. And it's important that it's her that you want to be like, you know, and we've talked about this, Jason. We need the men to step up and say, hey, you know what? Either I'm going to step aside and give this position to a woman, or I'm going to create a position. I'm going to send the elevator back down as women. It's so important that we do that, because for me growing up, I didn't have the her to look up to, but the most important thing is I had hers and women who said, you know, why not look at this? And when women are in these positions, and, you know, the saying is send the elevator back down, and we create opportunities and we open the doors and we're open and vulnerable and honest about what we've been through, but we want the next generation to do better than ourselves. I think that's when it's important, why it's important to have opportunities like this for women to lead us and be the way through. And I think, you know, Canada does such a great job of that. We can do better, but for us, it's an opportunity to have women lead us. And I think that's what's been special.
Robyn, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think models and representation is vital. When kids are developing their dreams, they base that off of what they see. So when they see women, when they see different groups of diversity in different roles, it shows what's possible, and it sets a new benchmark for where we can go from there. So as we keep making these shifts and seeing more players coming back into the system, more women leading, when you see Karina now taking this amazing position with CONCACAF, and now she's going to be doing it as a mother as well, it's showing us what's possible, and it's breaking down old mental constructs around, you know, what a woman can do or can't do, or what you can do as a mother or you can't. We have so much to give, and it's breaking off the limits. Like, we're really limitless in what we can do. And as Karina said, if we work together, we can continue to grow and evolve the game and, you know, and evolve our sport together. And that's what it's going to take.
I've actually never been called a mother and a leader. So that's the first time I've ever heard that. So that was beautiful to hear. But it's interesting to hear Robyn say that, because I think it's so important to see that, you know, and I've been very open and vulnerable about my journey so far as a mother. And, you know, I've gone through some difficult moments with being separated for 2 weeks and, you know, having to redefine and figure out myself throughout it. But I think as women, as we continue to evolve and we continue to be authentic and vulnerable in it, but have a team around us. And I think that's what our team did. And to this day, wherever I go, I'm looking for that team aspect of what we had, because it was so special. Not that I don't have that now, but when you have a group of women who went from the lowest of lows in 2011 to the highest of highs in 2012, and then to the highest of highs of hosting a World Cup, the bond that you create there and you share is unbelievable. And, you know, for me, like, and I'm making this personal because I went through that whole separation, and I remember I was in a pretty low of not being able to see my newborn baby. And I was like, you know, where's the team around me? And we had a Zoom call, and all of a sudden, I mean, Em kind of made it all funny because she was like, where's the baby? Like, the whole thing was, the team was like, okay, you know what? Don't bring up everything. You know, she has heart issues, and, you know, we want to keep her, like, cause I wasn't allowed to get too emotional, right? Because of the heart failure, I had to keep everything pretty even. And so all of a sudden, of anything that could have happened in my life, I mean, I'm a spiritual person, so I had God. The one thing that got me to where I needed to be was the Zoom call with the girls. Because these women have become family. These women, as much as we're all trying to do big things, and as much as we're all trying to impact the game, and as much as we're all trying to lead our lives, something that was so special about that 2015 team was the family that we created. And family wasn't like, okay, we have family and we want to go do these things. This was a family that you would put everything on the line for. And for me, in my moments of a near-death experience, seeing these women on the phone, it almost gets me emotional, was my game changer. So as we all went out to do big things in this world and maybe change people's lives, we also changed each other's lives within each other because of what we were willing to sacrifice for each other, the hard work we did. And people don't get to see that. And they don't get to know how special of a unit that 2015 team was. And I think that's what's most special to me. It was, forget the winning and losing, forget the outside, but on the inside, this team was so special that I know for me, in my toughest moment, this team was my answer. And I think that's what made this team so special. And, you know, as Robyn just said, that little point of being a mother, of course, Robyn would pick up on that and get me all emotional, but it was what this team meant for each of us beyond just what it meant for Canada.
I think one of the things that I learned through the journey with that team and with both of you is the importance of vulnerability and humility and being there for each other. It's something that I had very little understanding and recognition of when I played. And I wish I could go back. That's the one thing I wish I could go back and have that understanding of how important culture and the mental aspect of the game is to building that family. Robyn, that's the work that you do now with both the men's and the women's Excel programs. Is that the X factor? Is that where we're going to be better than everyone else? Is in understanding our culture, who we are, and where we need to be excellent in order to succeed on the field?
I think connection will be one of our X factors. I think it's fair to say in 2012 with that group, connection was our X factor. In a way, we had to compensate for other elements of what our team had. And in 2015, as our program continues to evolve, and we see the same thing with the caliber of players on the men's program as well, that we have an element of technical ability and skill level that's we've never seen, I don't think, before in Canada. But we also have this connection. And if you want to have a winning team, like a winning culture is not going to happen by accident. And you know, it's important scientifically because it increases the effectiveness of teams. And like you talked about, like people often undermine the importance of that vulnerability piece. And what that does is it's cultivating that trust and safety within the team. And that's where you develop those deeper layers of connection. And that's what makes you go beyond when you're on the pitch with your teammate. That's what makes you work. You know, you do that extra run, you do that extra recovery. That's what pushes you not to cut corners. And like Karina said, that's the same connection. That's what keeps us connected to this day. Like as soon as everything's been happening in this world in 2020, our team got together on a Zoom call. Like some of us haven't seen each other for years and we're still reconnecting and relying on that bond and that connection. But yeah, that's the work that is going to be necessary. Like for the women to to get back on that podium and to upgrade that medal to a gold, we're going to dig deep and be really deliberate around our culture. And to get our men's team to qualify for this 2022 Olympics, we're going to dig deep and we're going to have a strong culture, and it's going to drive both of our programs to success, because that's the trajectory we're on. And that's what our players deserve and need at this time. And like you said, Jason, you can, maybe more than you see it, you can definitely feel the difference when you have that level of connection within your team. So that is primarily what I work towards, is developing, like, how can we deliberately cultivate and build that connection within both of our programs?
Well, I'm excited to be involved and to have both of you involved, because the future looks bright. It really does. I've said this many, many times. I've never been more excited about what the future holds for Canada soccer, because we have great people, men and women, working together towards the betterment of the game across the country. Thank you both very much for taking the time. I know you're both very busy. We may have lost Karina. She may have had to very, very, very quickly jet off to deal with Paris, and mothering and more important things have called. But Robyn, thanks very much for taking the time to join us. We really appreciate it, and stay safe.
Thanks, Jason. Thank you.
When we come back after the break, we'll speak with Brad. We'll get his thoughts on that incredible conversation, the key takeaways, and talk about what's coming up next. Stay tuned. Joined now by Brad Fougere, Digital and Corporate Communications Manager with Canada Soccer. Brad, you just had a passenger seat to a fantastic conversation with three incredible women who are leading the game in our country and across our confederation. What was a big takeaway for you with Karina and Robyn?
It's a legacy thing in my mind. I mean, the legacy that this organization will see out of the successes of people like Sandra, Gage, and obviously Robyn and Karina, Peter, Victor. Like the past couple of weeks, we've really illustrated that anyone involved in the game today is sort of standing on the shoulders of giants, right? I mean, we've seen such tremendous growth and such tremendous people. I mean, it's impossible not to comment on how much energy Karina LeBlanc has for this game in Canada and now all over. And to know that she's a new mom and to have children, we know how tiring that can be, and yet she still has that energy, the energy levels. I mean, it's impossible to think of anyone else who could lead the development or continued development of women's football better than Karina LeBlanc could.
Yeah. If you don't follow Karina on whichever social media platform is your preference, you should, because she's specifically on Twitter and Instagram. She's documented her journey as a mother, and she's done some other media that has gone into some of the detail. She mentioned there that, she had a separation from her daughter Paris for 14 days. She actually had, after she gave birth, she had an emergency trip to the hospital. She had a heart condition that was very, very serious, and then came into potential contact with someone who had COVID-19, so then had to self-isolate and quarantine for 14 days just after her daughter was born, which is incredibly difficult. I can imagine how hard that was for her and her husband, Jason. But I think her vulnerability is also revealing her strength, and it's showing the world what an incredible woman she is. I've said to her previously, like, you're a force of nature. Like, you are just an absolute force to be reckoned with. And she can go on and do whatever she wants to do in the game. One day, head of CONCACAF, head of FIFA, who knows? She could reach the very top, whatever she wants to do. I don't think there are any barriers that are in her way. And Robyn Gayle is another one who's gone into both the men's and the women's environment and been a very, very strong leading voice in those environments for culture and the importance of mental resilience and the work that she does. And I've been very fortunate to see it firsthand and to have some pretty deep conversations with Robyn about that, and even feel the need to have that conversation with her about myself and my own role. So it's great to see women leading women. And again, you go back to this concept, this program that John Herdman first introduced when he was the women's national team Excel director and head coach, and that Canada Soccer has supported, that Canada Soccer has then gone on and helped implement. So I think it's an important aspect of developing more female leaders. One of the things that I learned, Brad, in conversation with both Karina and Robyn and other female leaders within the game, is that oftentimes women will not come forward and apply for a position because they feel that they maybe are not qualified, or they won't get the job, or that they're not worthy. And they often need to be sponsored. They need to be mentored. They need to be promoted. They need to be asked. They need to be personally asked to participate. And what I found is when I've done that, I've been astonished at the response. How many women have said, yes, I want to be involved. Thank you for asking. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for taking that step. And I feel like we have a role to play in the game as men who have traditionally not done that. And it's not going to change until we start doing it and start holding each other accountable to that, and start including these incredible women who are in our sport in roles of leadership, and making that a requirement that we have that gender diversity, because we will all benefit, boys, girls, men, women, everyone who's involved in our sport will benefit from that process.
Yeah, there's no denying. I mean, we're in this odd situation in Canada where we have this terrifically successful women's national team that's been supported as widely as it's been supported. And I mean, my start in soccer before I got back into coaching was writing about this women's national team program and what they were and who they were as you know, far back as sort of 2006, 2007. The challenge that we've run into is there's this juggernaut to the south that does what it does and is what it is. And so sometimes we're sort of in the shadow of that program, for better or worse. But when you start to sort of peel back some of the layers and see who the people are and see what they're doing and see what this team has been able to accomplish, in spite of, you know, all of the challenges that we talk about every episode, the size of this country, the challenges of developing players across 13 provincial and territorial realities, et cetera, this program has been insanely successful. And obviously hosting a Women's World Cup and it being more successful than anyone could have ever imagined, except the leaders who put it together, who had that history of success in every other time that they've done this. It's a special program, right? This women's national team program is a special program. And women's soccer in this country is different, right? It's a different thing. It's a different culture. It's capable of whatever it wants to be capable of, and people get impassioned and caught up in that. And so, the natural next step for that, obviously, is to support whoever wants to be involved. I mean, you know, I have a daughter. You have a daughter. We I take her out to play soccer whenever I could. A quick story. The first thing I ever said to my daughter, and this is the most embarrassing thing I'll have ever said on this podcast. I picked her up and I took her to the window, literally in the birthing room, and said, "That's the outdoors. That's where you play soccer."
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
So I mean, the women's game means an awful lot to me. I remember the first time I met Karina LeBlanc was in Toronto at a women's national team game against Mexico. The hairs on my arms stood up when I heard her voice coming down the tunnel. She just has that type of energy. It's incredible. Robyn Gayle is one of the most thoughtful people at Canada Soccer. Full stop.
Yeah.
And so we're in really great shape with this women's leadership group that came through. You're right. There's much more to do, and it's a special program. So you have to know that there are people who want to be involved.
Yeah, it's exciting times. It really is. And you look at the next generation, the younger players that are coming through, the Kadisha Buchanans, the Jessie Flemings, the Jordan Heidemas, who are going to take that program on to another level and build on the great work that had already been done. It is an exciting time for sure. I also want to pay respects in some respects to the people that have brought this tournament to Canada. So we had Sandra Gage on. She was instrumental. Obviously, Peter Montopoli, Victor Montagliani, all of the support staff, people like Joe Guest, Earl Cochran, who did so much work to ensure that both Canada Soccer kept moving in the right direction, but that these events go off without a hitch and are world-class events. I think the one expression that I lean on when I think about the impact and the legacy of these tournaments is that you know that you have done something special when you're planting seeds for trees under which you are never going to sit. And I feel like that is what these tournaments have done, is that they have planted a seed, a spark in the minds, the hearts of children who have experienced these events. In 2015, the Women's World Cup, the amount of boys and girls that I saw in the stadium was incredible. And I was very fortunate to be able to go to most of the stadiums and call games and see that firsthand. The same thing's going to happen in 2026 when Canada co-hosts the Men's World Cup, where the next generation is going to be inspired by that. And the impact of that is only going to be seen in 10 years, in 15 years, in 20 years time. So kudos to everyone who's involved in that process. They often operate behind the scenes, in the shadows, behind the curtain, where they don't want the accolades, they don't want the spotlight. But that work is what builds the foundation for the work that everyone does see to take place. And that's equally as important as the work that we're doing on the coaching side and the playing side, for sure. So it was a fascinating conversation. It's one I'm really going to look forward to listening back to myself in the days and weeks ahead. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here along the journey and listening to Karina, Robyn, and Sandra, and a little bit of myself and Brad pontificating at the end and reflecting on what we learned from that experience. It's been great to have this discussion. We look forward to many more in the future. And until then, stay safe, look after each other, be well. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.